I never expected that night to change the way I saw everything, my career, my choices, and especially the man I had worked beside for over a decade. But some moments sneak up on you when you least expect them, unfolding like a perfectly timed symphony, each note striking something deep within you. It started as an ordinary evening. The company's annual gala had just ended, and the city lights shimmered through the wide glass windows of the rooftop venue. The laughter of colleagues still echoed in my ears as I stepped outside, inhaling the cool night air, grateful to be away from the noise. My heels pinched slightly, reminders of the long hours spent standing and smiling. I was ready to leave, but as I turned, I saw him. Edward, my boss for the past 12 years, silver at the temples, sharply dressed, and carrying himself with the confidence of a man who had built something from the ground up. At 61, he was as composed and controlled as ever, but something in his expression that night felt different. "Just getting some air," I replied, offering a small smile. "That was quite a party," he said, stepping beside me, hands tucked into his pockets. His usual air of authority was softened by the glow of the streetlights. "It was. But I'll be honest, these events aren't really my thing." I chuckled. "Funny, you host them every year." He tilted his head slightly toward me. "You, on the other hand, actually seem to enjoy yourself." I shrugged. "I suppose I've learned to play the part." He let out a low laugh, and for a moment, we stood in comfortable silence. The city hummed around us, but in that small pocket of time, it was just the two of us, side by side, away from the structured formalities of the office. Then came the words I hadn't expected. "I'm not ready to go home yet," he admitted. "Would you care to join me for a drink?" I hesitated. It wasn't unusual for us to talk outside of work, late-night calls, strategy meetings that stretched into the evening. But this felt different. There was something unspoken in his tone, something that made my pulse quicken, just a little. "Sure," I finally said. "Why not?" We walked down the street, away from the bright-lit towers of downtown and into a quieter part of the city. He led me to a small lounge, intimate, with low lighting and soft jazz playing in the background. It was the kind of place that felt timeless, untouched by the rush of the world outside. As we settled into a corner booth, he loosened his tie, a gesture I had rarely seen. He looked at me, really looked at me, as if seeing me in a new light. "You've been with the company a long time," he said, swirling the amber liquid in his glass. 12 years, I nodded. "Have you ever wondered what life might have looked like if you'd chosen a different path?" His question caught me off guard. "Are you asking if I regret my choices?" He shook his head. "Not regret, just curiosity. Do you ever wonder about the roads not taken?" I exhaled slowly. "I think we all do at some point, but I've always believed that every decision, every turn we take, leads us exactly where we're meant to be." He smiled at that. "That's a wise way of looking at things." We talked, really talked, for the first time in years. Not about work, not about deadlines or quarterly reports, but about life. He told me about his early years, the struggles of building the company, the sacrifices that came with it. I shared pieces of myself too, the dreams I once had, the moments that shaped me. Time blurred. One drink turned into 2, then 3. And somewhere between reminiscing and laughter, the air between us shifted. He reached across the table, fingers grazing the back of my hand, hesitant, searching. I didn't pull away. There was a moment, a suspended breath, where everything hung in the balance. And then quietly he said, "I never told you this, but I've always admired you, beyond just your work. You have this presence, this way of making the world feel grounded, even when everything else is chaos. My heart beat a little faster. I was no stranger to compliments, but this felt different. It wasn't flattery. It was something deeper, something real. "You've always been the one constant," he continued, his voice softer now, stripped of its usual authority. And maybe it took me too long to realize just how much that means. I swallowed, unsure how to respond. He wasn't just my boss. He was a man I had respected for years, whose opinion I valued more than I cared to admit. And yet, sitting there, in the warmth of that dimly lit lounge, I wasn't thinking about work or professionalism. I was thinking about the way he looked at me, as if seeing a woman he hadn't allowed himself to truly see before. "I should probably head home," I finally said, though my voice lacked conviction. He studied me for a long moment, then nodded. "Let me walk you." The streets were quieter now, the city settling into its late-night rhythm. As we reached my building, we lingered at the entrance. "Thank you for tonight," he said, "for listening." I smiled. "I could say the same to you." There was a pause, a hesitation. And then, before I could second-guess myself, I leaned in, just slightly, just enough. It was the kind of moment where the world narrows down to two people, where the past and the future fade, leaving only the now. But before anything else could happen, I pulled back, my breath unsteady. "Good night, Edward," I whispered, stepping inside before I could lose myself completely. As the door closed behind me, I pressed my back against it, heart pounding. Something had shifted between us, and deep down, I knew this was only the beginning. The next morning, I woke up earlier than usual, my mind still tangled in the events of the previous night. The way Edward had looked at me, the warmth of his hand against mine, the unspoken words hanging between us. I had spent years seeing him only as my boss, a man of authority, respect, and distance. But now, I couldn't stop thinking about him as Edward, the man who had let his guard down, who had spoken with quiet vulnerability, who had looked at me in a way that made my pulse quicken. I shook my head, trying to clear the thoughts as I poured my morning coffee. This was ridiculous. Nothing had happened. Nothing could happen. But as I walked into the office, I felt a strange, lingering tension, as if the air itself had changed. I caught sight of him through the glass of his office. He was on a call, but for the briefest moment his eyes flicked up and met mine. A pause. A hesitation. Then he gave me the smallest of smiles, one only I would notice. I felt it like a quiet storm beneath my skin. The day passed in a blur of meetings and emails, but my mind kept drifting. It didn't help that Edward seemed more present than usual, stopping by my desk more than necessary, holding my gaze just a second too long. By late afternoon, I was restless. I needed fresh air, something to clear my thoughts. I stepped outside onto the small office terrace, inhaling the crisp autumn air. The city buzzed below, a symphony of distant honks and chatter. I was so lost in thought that I didn't hear the door open behind me. "You've been avoiding me." Edward's voice was calm, but there was an edge to it. I turned, forcing a light chuckle. "Avoiding you? That's a bit dramatic." He stepped closer, hands tucked into his pockets, that same unreadable expression on his face. "Is it?" Sighed, rubbing my temples. "Edward, last night was different." He finished for me. "I know." I looked up at him, at the man I had worked beside for so many years. And yet in this moment, he felt unfamiliar. Or maybe, for the first time, I was seeing him clearly. "We can't do this," I said quietly, though the words felt hollow, even as I spoke them. He studied me for a long moment, then exhaled. I know what you're thinking, that this is dangerous, that it changes things. It does change things, I said firmly. Edward, you're my boss. There are rules, expectations. I don't care about rules, he interrupted, his voice low but steady. I stared at him. This wasn't the composed, calculated man I knew. This was someone else, someone who, for once, wasn't thinking about business or control or responsibility. He was thinking about me. You're overcomplicating this, he said, his words hanging in the air between us. He continued, his tone softer now. Last night we weren't boss and employee. We were just two people. And I know, we both felt something. I swallowed hard. That doesn't mean it's right. He tilted his head, his gaze searching mine. And yet you haven't said you don't feel it too. I opened my mouth, but no words came. The truth sat heavy between us, undeniable and raw. I had felt something I hadn't felt in a long time. He took a step closer, his voice barely above a whisper. Tell me I'm wrong, and I'll drop it. I'll forget last night ever happened. I wanted to. I wanted to say the words, to pull away, to pretend that everything could go back to the way it was. But I didn't, because I wasn't sure I wanted to. The air between us crackled, an invisible thread pulling us closer. My breath hitched as he reached out, fingertips just barely brushing my wrist. A question, not a demand. And for the first time in years, I didn't want to think. I didn't pull away. Edward's fingertips barely skimmed the inside of my wrist, but I felt it everywhere. My pulse quickened, the warmth of his touch sending a quiet shiver through me. For years, I had lived inside the boundaries of what was expected of me, of my career, of my age. I had built a life around predictability and reason. But standing there with Edward, looking at me as if I were something new and unexpected, I felt the walls shift. He was waiting, watching for any sign that I wanted this as much as he did. And in that moment, I did. I let out a slow breath. Edward, I don't know where this leads. He gave a small smile. Neither do I. But that doesn't mean we have to run from it. A breeze rustled through the terrace, and I shivered. He noticed immediately, slipping off his suit jacket and draping it over my shoulders. His scent, faintly spiced cologne, something warm and familiar, wrapped around. Miao, come on, he said, nodding toward the office door. Let's get out of here. I hesitated. You mean now? Why not? His voice was light, but there was something underneath, something quietly determined. I glanced back inside, through the glass doors. The office was still humming with end-of-day energy, people moving through the motions of their routines. If I went back in, I knew exactly how the night would go. Gather my things, go home, make dinner, and sit alone with my thoughts, pretending nothing had changed. But something had changed. And for the first time in a long time, I didn't want to let an opportunity pass me by. All right, I said, my voice steadier than I expected. Let's go. We ended up in a quiet, dimly lit restaurant just a few blocks away. The kind of place where the music was low and the waiter spoke in hushed tones. Edward ordered a bottle of wine, and as the first sip warmed my throat, I felt myself start to relax. So, I said, setting my glass down, what exactly are we doing here? He leaned back, studying me with that same unreadable expression he always had in the office. But tonight there was something else there. Honestly, he said, swirling his wine, watching the deep red liquid catch the light, I just wanted to be somewhere with you where we didn't have to pretend. I swallowed. Pretend? He met my eyes. That last night didn't mean something. The words landed between us, heavy and unshakable. I opened my mouth, searching for the right thing to say. But for once, I didn't want to be careful. I didn't want to analyze every word before it left my lips. I exhaled. It did. A flicker of something passed over his face. Relief, maybe, or something deeper. We talked for hours after that. Not about work, not about responsibilities, but about us. I told him things I hadn't admitted out loud in years. How I had spent so long putting my career first. How I had convinced myself that love, passion, connection were for other people. Younger people. People who still had all the time in the world. Edward listened. Really listened. And when I finally fell quiet, he reached across the table, his fingers brushing mine in a touch so simple, yet so deliberate, that my breath caught. "You're not alone in that," he said. And I believed him. By the time we left the restaurant, the city had quieted. The streets glowed with the soft amber hue of streetlights, the distant hum of traffic filling the silence between us. We walked for a while, neither of us ready to say goodbye just yet. At a crosswalk, he stopped and turned to me. "I don't want to rush this," he said softly. "But I also don't want to pretend that this doesn't matter." My heart pounded. "Edward?" He gave a small chuckle, shaking his head. "I know it's complicated." I let out a breathy laugh. "That's an understatement." We stood there for a moment, the city moving around us, yet somehow it felt like we were the only two people in the world. Then, without thinking, without planning, without overthinking, I stepped closer. Edward's breath hitched, his eyes searching mine. And then, finally, I let myself feel it. The kiss was slow, tentative, like the first few notes of a song neither of us knew the melody to just yet. His hand cradled the side of my face, his touch careful, reverent. When we finally pulled away, his forehead rested lightly against mine. "This changes everything, doesn't it?" I whispered. "It does," he murmured, "but maybe that's not such a bad thing." I closed my eyes, letting the warmth of the moment sink in. Maybe, just maybe, he was right. I woke up the next morning with a mix of emotions swirling inside me. Excitement, nervousness, uncertainty. The memory of last night lingered on my lips, in the warmth of Edward's touch, in the way he had looked at me, like I was something worth waiting for. But now, with the morning sun spilling, through my bedroom window, reality started to creep back in. I was still his employee. He was still my boss. And we had crossed a line that couldn't be undone. My phone buzzed on the nightstand. A message from Edward. Morning. No regrets, I hope. A small smile pulled at my lips as I typed back. Me neither. His response was immediate, not a single one. Can I see you later? I hesitated. Not because I didn't want to, I did, but because I wasn't sure what later meant for us. Could we exist outside of the office? Outside of the neatly drawn lines we had both followed for so long? I took a deep breath and replied, "Yes, but we need to talk first." That evening, we met at a quiet park just outside the city, away from the noise and the prying eyes of the office. Edward was already waiting when I arrived, leaning against a bench, hands in his pockets. He looked up as I approached, his expression softer than I had ever seen. "Hey," he said. "Hey," I echoed. Sitting beside him, for a moment we just sat there, watching the golden light of the setting sun filter through the trees. Then I spoke. "Edward, I need to know. Where does this go from here?" He exhaled as if he had been waiting for the question. I don't have all the answers, he admitted, but I know what I don't want. I don't want last night to be something we pretend never happened. I nodded slowly. Me neither. He turned toward me. Then let's not make this about rules or expectations. Let's make this about us, whatever that looks like. I swallowed hard. And work? He gave a soft chuckle. I won't let this affect your career. You've worked too hard for that. If we need to have a conversation about boundaries at the office, we will. But I don't want to lose whatever this is just because of logistics. His words settled something deep inside me, something I had buried for so long. I had let my fear of the unknown keep me from taking risks, from feeling things I told myself I was too old to feel. But here was Edward, standing beside me, willing to figure it out with me. I reached for his hand. Okay, I said, my voice steady. Let's see where this goes. The relief in his smile was undeniable, and as he pulled me into a slow, lingering kiss under the fading light of the evening, I realized something. This wasn't just a night that took an unforgettable turn. This was a new beginning,